The clock struck midnight as I prepared to close the doors of our quaint small-town library. The night was quiet and the dim glow of the lampposts outside casted an eerie glow between the bookshelves. As I went about my usual closing routine, a faint sense of unease gnawed at me, a feeling that I wasn't alone. I brushed off the sensation as a byproduct of working the late shift and the creaks of an old building settling. With a deep breath, I flicked off the last few lights, leaving only a dim glow in the main reading area. As I made my way towards the exit, I heard it, a soft rustling sound, like the turning of pages coming from the rows of books. I paused, my heart beginning to race. It was odd for there to be anybody else in the library at this hour, but perhaps a patron had lost track of time. Trying to reassure myself, I called out, "Is there somebody still there? We're closing up now." Silence greeted my words and my unease grew. I moved toward the sound, my footsteps echoing through the empty library. The rustling continued intermittently, as if someone were shuffling through the pages of a book. As I rounded a corner, I saw a faint shadow move between the bookshelves. My breath caught in my throat and I called out again, my voice now trembling with fear. "Hello? Is there anyone there?" No response. Summoning my courage, I approached the spot where I had seen the shadow. My eyes darted around, searching for any sign of movement. The rustling continued, growing louder and more frenzied, as if something or someone was trying to hide. I felt a chill run down my spine, my imagination conjuring up all sorts of terrifying scenarios. Were we being robbed? Was somebody hiding in the library, biding their time and waiting to strike? With each step, the tension in the air seemed to thicken. My heart pounded in my chest as I turned a corner, only to find an empty aisle of books. The rustling, however, persisted, seeming to move further away from me. Without much left to do, I decided to confront whatever or whoever was causing the disturbance. My hands trembled as I gripped a heavy reference book, using it as a makeshift weapon. With each step, my breathing grew shallow and I called out, my voice now tinged with desperation. "I know you're there. Show yourself." The rustling came to an abrupt halt, and the library fell silent once again. My heart thundered in my chest as I steeled myself for a confrontation. But as I reached the end of the bookshelves, there was nothing. No sign of the mysterious presence, no intruder lurking in the shadows. It was as if the source of the sound had vanished into thin air. Confused and on edge, I made my way back to the front of the library, double-checking the doors and windows to ensure that they were locked. The building felt even more ominous now, every creak and groan amplifying my sense of vulnerability. Reluctantly, I decided that it was time to leave. I hurriedly gathered my belongings and made my way to the exit, locking the door behind me. The street outside was empty and quiet, a stark contrast to the unsettling atmosphere within the library. As I walked home, my mind raced with unanswered questions. What had I heard? Was it a figment of my imagination? Or was there something truly mysterious lurking in the shadows of our small-town library? To this day, I can't explain the strange sounds that I heard that night. Were they just a figment of my imagination? A tired mind after working a long day? I'm not sure, but I really hope that I don't hear them again. I, a 52-year-old female at the time, was traveling by car to an out-of-town job assignment. I had stopped at a popular and busy gas station/travel stop to fill up the car, stretch my legs, use the restroom, and grab a snack. I was approached by a developmentally disabled woman who appeared to be in her mid-20s. She was looking for a ride to a town a couple of towns over. Her ride had abandoned her while she was in the restroom. She was a little upset. She didn't have a cell phone and didn't know any phone numbers, so I could call somebody for her. I checked with the employees at the store and they said that she had been there for an hour looking for a ride because she said her friends left her while she was in the restroom. I then made the decision to do something that I had never done before: offer a stranger a ride. I wasn't going to the town she wanted to go to, but I was heading in that direction, and I told her that I could go and drop her off at the grocery store in the next town where I would be turning off to go to my destination. The grocery store was always busy, and it was very likely that she would have an easier time getting a ride to where she wanted to go. Also, she'd be 5 miles away from where she wanted to go instead of 25 miles, and she would have an easier time walking that distance if she had to. This was agreeable to her, and we set off. Right away, I noticed a van following us. I tried to lose the van, but it kept pace. Meanwhile, the woman wanted to play with my phone. I told her no, and it wasn't a toy. It was for work, and I moved it out of her reach. The van speeds up and it starts to get closer. The woman suddenly remembers that her boyfriend's phone number, and we don't need to call him. I can't use my phone while driving. This was before pre-car sync voice-activated operation stuff, and I was approaching the outskirts of the business district of the next town and with no cell phone use, signs everywhere. I told her, "Hey, we're almost to the grocery store. We can call them from the parking lot." But she becomes agitated and yells, "No, you have to take me home." I told you that I can't do that. I'm not going there. It's in the opposite direction of where I need to go, and I'm expected soon. We'll call them from the parking lot. She becomes more upset and frustrated. The van is getting closer. I pull into the grocery store parking lot, and it's about 4 p.m. The grocery store is busy. I pull up in front of the store and ask for her boyfriend's number. She can't remember his number. She won't get out of the car, and she's arguing with me, and the van is pulling into the parking lot. There's a sheriff's deputy parked nearby, and I roll down my window and signal that I need to speak to him. He walks over and asks me what's going on. I tell him where I met the woman and how she won't get out of the car, and under my breath, I tell him the van has been following us. The deputy tells the woman, "She brought you where you asked her to. It's time for you to leave her car now." She slowly gets out of the car, and I ask once more for her boyfriend's number, and she says, "You're crazy, I don't have a boyfriend. Oh look, there are my friends now." And she points to the van. The deputy and I share a look, and he says, "Give me your contact info. I can delay them for about 20 minutes while I check their license and registration and lecture them about abandoning a special needs adult. You get out of here and I'll check on you before my shift's over. And don't pick up any more hitchhikers." I left and went on to my destination. He called me to make sure that I got to where I was going and told me that they were keeping an eye on the van and its owner. He told me that he also contacted a colleague at the sheriff's department in the county where I was working at, and that she would contact me in a day or two. While I was on assignment there, I spoke to 2 deputies and a detective about the woman in the van. No one ever told me anything about them, but they were very interested in them. My nightmare is one day that I'll turn on a true crime show and see a report about this woman and her group robbing and killing people. When I was younger and just got into online college, I got my first apartment. I had 3 jobs and one was third shift, but I was more than ready for independence. While I had a great time there, I did have one problem: my new downstairs neighbor. So the other tenants are a bit older than I am, with one of them being an old man who'd lived there for about 20 years. The other was an older woman with a small kid. Probably had been there for about 3 or 4 years, and in an empty apartment downstairs. I kept to myself, so I never really spoke to any of them before until I noticed that there was a new move-in. A man that seemed close to my age, maybe a little bit older. Black, greasy hair and a little overweight, but in my experience living here, people seem nice and I was happy to possibly have somebody to say hello to. That possibility turned sour really quick when a casual hello turned into, "That trash stinks," remarks from him when I was taking out the trash, and snide remarks under his breath when I've done nothing. Even remarking on my sister's lack of a bra when she came to visit me. Naturally, I was grossed out and annoyed that he had to comment on anyone, especially my sister, and I told the landlord. Nothing came out of it, of course. One day I was asleep and somebody came banging at my door. I had no idea who it was and my anxiety was beyond strong. I'm alone and never expected a knock that wasn't planned. It was the neighbors saying that I was being too loud and I needed to stop harassing him. I explained through a closed door that I was asleep and that I was not making noise. He left and stomped on the stairs while muttering and calling me a bee. My heart felt like it was beating out of my chest. I went back to bed only to hear him coming back up the stairs and banging at my door. When I had addressed him again, he said that I was harassing him and that he's calling the cops because I'm still making noise. I told him to ask the other neighbor because there's no way that I could possibly be making noise when he's on the other side of the building. He thanks me politely before stomping off and cursing and calling me the same thing yet again. I tell the landlord right away that one of his tenants is acting hostile and that I don't feel comfortable or safe, and he tells me that he'll look into it. I hear nothing for a week. It turned out that it was the old neighbor hitting the floor with a stick like one of those classic cartoons because the rude neighbor was playing music too loud. I swear that he should have known that, as I'm on the other side. It was like he had wanted an excuse to come speak to me. The following months it only got worse. One day I had walked out in a snowsuit so that I could play in the snow. I'm a big kid at heart. He had to remark on my clothing being unnecessary, even when there was 3 feet of snow outside. I forgot what I said in response, something like it's not his business, but he basically just said, "Screw you." I just walked off to go play in the snow. It gave me a little enjoyment because of the earlier interaction, so I went back home to get ready for work. The snowstorm only got worse, and I had just come back from my night shift. I see him alone in the parking lot with the car on and the windows up. I was on high alert as I carefully walked around and up the alley to my apartment. The second that I closed the door to go upstairs, I heard loud, wall-shaking music. It was him blasting music from his car, in a snowstorm at 3 a.m. I was surprised and confused because what was his reasoning? He did it until 8 in the morning, and I found out later that it was to spite the old neighbor for telling him his music was too loud. Soon, it all started getting serious, cursing in the hallway and playing music even louder, with the police knocking at our doors asking us about a noise disturbance, and now a mutual hatred amongst the neighbors at the guy who kept us all up. But that's not the worst part. I just got back from my night shift and it's 3 a.m. yet again. I'm dragging my tired feet over to the mailboxes that are right inside the townhouse door. As I'm looking through the ads and letters, his door opens at the top of the stairs. My stomach tightens, hoping that I don't have to interact with him, but it drops when he starts speaking unintelligibly. At the top of the stairs, he's gurgling and mumbling something. "What?" I said, but he repeats these same weird sounds again, only more aggressive. I felt that something was more than off, and I noped right around and out the door, heading back to my car. I thought that I would rather sleep in my car than possibly be attacked in the hallway, and as I'm having the thought, I hear the window above slam open. I freeze and then spin back around the edge of the corner, It's him, and he's looking for me out the window. I stand there for a moment listening to him, and he's speaking gibberish and yelling. I thought to myself that it was my chance to sneak upstairs, past his door and into my apartment. I sped up the stairs and past his door to the second flight of stairs. Right as I reach the top of the second flight of stairs, his door swings open with a big slam that makes me jump, and I hear him muttering and gibberishly speaking loudly while walking up the stairs. My heart is beating out of my ribcage as I'm simultaneously walking and fishing my keys out of my bag. Like a classic horror movie, I kept fumbling the keys looking for the correct one in the dark hallway as I hear him walking up the last couple steps. I mentally told myself not to panic as I spot the correct key, slide it into the keyhole on the first go, and swing the door open, and I practically launch myself inside before slamming it shut behind me. I pause and hold my breath as I hear him just 5 feet from the door, muttering gibberish and calling me something before walking back downstairs and out of the building. I watched him through a crack in my window blind, pacing back and forth, muttering, cursing, and at one point, screaming before walking off into the night. With a little bit of relief, I head to bed hoping that he doesn't come back. The next day, I get a text from the landlord. He says that the guy was arrested and that he wouldn't be coming back. Seems that he was off his meds again, and he attached a link in the text. Of course, I raised an eyebrow to that comment, thinking, oh, now you tell me. The following link that he had showed a mugshot and a description of his nightly activity, to include stealing from a Turkey Hill, threatening cops, and punching one of them, and previous to all of this it said, earlier in the night when he dropped his pants and rubbed himself against the window, and then ran around the town square while yelling. I never did see him again, just his family coming in and moving his stuff. I was just recently reminded of this story by another hitchhiking story on here. My dad used to tell me and my brother all sorts of stories from his youth hitchhiking down the East Coast. There are 2 that have always really stuck with me, and I figured if you guys like this one, I'll talk about the other one too. When my dad was 15, he left home in Massachusetts and hitchhiked down to Florida, where his older sister was living in Daytona. This event apparently happened on his trip somewhere in Virginia. He had been trying to hitch a ride outside of some city, though he could never remember which one. This happened in '76, and there were a lot of drugs done between then and now. And this really nice car stopped and picked him up. He and the driver get to talking, and the guy tells my dad that he's a surgeon at one of the local hospitals. He gives him a business card and tells him if he ever needs anything at that hospital, to give them his name. All seems to be going well, and he is apparently heading pretty far south for some family function, so it's a long way that my dad doesn't have to walk. He seems like a nice, professional guy, clean-cut and well-spoken. But then stuff starts to get weird. My dad's exact wording at this part of the story every time that he tells it. And the doctor starts giving my dad the side eye, and seems like he wants to say something but can't quite figure out how to say it. Of course, my dad is just sort of ignoring him because, as he says, I had been on the road for a while and hadn't had a shower or changing clothes in weeks. Then the guy finally comes out and says it. Can I suck? My dad was obviously taken aback by this, and he tells him no. Please, just a little. No. I'll give you $50 if you let me do it. No. How about you let me see it then? Can I see it? No. I think you better let me off here. And surprisingly, without any resistance, the guy does. He pulls off at a rest stop and he lets my dad out. Before he pulls away, he hands my dad that $50 and he tells him, "Sorry about that, man. I hope I didn't blow your mind or anything." This isn't super creepy, but I thought you guys might like it. My dad always says that the guy didn't seem like a bad guy, just really messed up. And honestly sorry to have freaked him out so bad. I have no way of knowing if it is totally true, except that my aunt says my dad told her the same story when he got to Florida just a few weeks later.